Yes, ma'am, you're on.
Thank you. I walked for a long time through the fissures in the earth, carrying Mademba, heavy like a sleeping child in my arms. Until a man is dead, he's not yet done being created. Temporary madness makes it possible to forget the truth about bullets. Temporary madness is bravery's sister in war. Very good afternoon, evening, morning to everyone around the world, across ponds and across puddles who are here with us today. It's such a pleasure to see so many of you and more to come. At Night, All Blood is Black is the book on our platter today. It was the winner of the 2021 International Booker Prize, written in 2018 by Senegalese-French author David Diop. It is a disturbing book. It's a different kind of book. Lots of blood and gore, but under the blood and gore, the message of colonialism, to me as a reader who's a post-colonialist, comes through very clearly. Many aspects will be unveiled by many of the speakers here today, our co-readers. So just to put us on the same page and make those of us in the audience who are not very familiar perhaps with the context or even with the story, if you haven't had a chance to read the book, I've prepared, as I try and do every time, a small, brief but comprehensive PowerPoint. So without further ado, let's start on that. Gurudas, shall we?
Sure, ma'am. In a minute.
So this is David Diop, and he was actually instigated by the stony silence of his grandfather when his grandfather fought the trench wars in World War I. Next, please. So to put us in the paradigmatic geography, this is Senegal, colonized by the French, and very much the story of darkest Africa. So you had the Belgians, probably the worst colonizers. You had the French, you had the British, you had the Dutch. It was a time of subjugation, abjectness, poverty, and a stratification of human beings like no other than what the Europeans did all over the world. West coast of Africa, one of the hardest hit. So Senegal in this novel becomes a trope for the worst kind of colonial subjugation, worst kind of colonial interests, and perhaps it opens up questions on a weird kind of globalization and migration. Next, please. So, At Night, All Blood is Black was picked as the winner of the International Booker from about 125 submitted books. Lucy Hughes Hallett said, she was one of the judges, that Many books submitted this year, including David Diop's, examined colonialism and migration. And migration is, of course, what comes as a sequel to colonialism. It's about people moving around the world, maybe being welcome, maybe being not welcome to host countries, being kept out. That's what a lot of the writers wanted to address. So very, very focused trope, metaphor, something that stands for the Senegalese nationhood in war is the tirailleurs, which were a corps of colonial infantry in the French army, were initially recruited from Senegal, French West Africa, then Western Central, and the rest of Africa. The main areas were the sub-Saharan regions of the French colonial empire. So this is how typically a Senegalese soldier, like Alpha in our novel, would be looking like. Next, please, Gurudash. Thanks. So this is something I wanted to draw your attention to. My grandfather never said anything to his wife or to my mother about his experience. This is why I was always very interested by all the tales and accounts which gave one access to a form of intimacy with that particular war. This is David Diop in an interview. Because his great-grandfather refused to speak about the war, Diop read many published accounts regarding the tirailleurs service. So to put the war in context, to put our novel in context, 2 billion Africans were killed when the continent was drawn into the conflagration of the First World War. That's a lot of people. The war and its aftermath wrought seismic changes in Africa that remain at the root of conflicts in many countries. Just to put it in perspective, as far as I remember, we have historian Dr. Harish Mehta here, if I'm wrong, but I feel, if I've read correctly, 1.2 million Indian soldiers were killed during the First World War. Am I right, Harish? We'll come back to that later. Okay, Gurudash, can we have the next slide, please? So Diop and his translator, this is just a little trivia, Anna Moshovakis, split the £50,000 annual prize, which goes to the best author and translator of a work, translated into English, and it has become the center of a lot of interest by a lot of new writers who are not necessarily writing in English, but the prize money is a big draw. Diop's novel, which interweaves the history of World War I with the history of colonialism then, describes the experiences of Senegalese tirailleurs fighting for France in the trenches. The main character of our book, Alpha and Diaye, descends into madness following the death of a childhood friend and inflicts extreme brutality upon his German enemies. Diop was inspired to write the book by his French great-grandfather's service during the war. Next, please. So approximately 135,000 Senegalese tirailleurs fought in Europe, 30,000 killed at that time. And trench warfare there was an innovation in weaponry. It was matched by an utter lack of imagination in fighting tactics and strategy. The result was a long, bloody, ferocious, long-suffering war and futile stalemate in the trenches of Western Europe. We were speaking about flooding, we were speaking about water coming into the houses now in London because of global warming and the rains there. Imagine what it would have been in the trenches in north of France, where they were fighting to keep the German army at bay, northeastern France. Close to Reims, actually, if any of you have been to Reims Cathedral, some of the finest art was destroyed by the Germans during the war. And so let's go to the next one. So I just want to read this out to you because I'm quickly going to relate it to two great theorists who are living today. One is Julia Kristeva and the other is, I think we will concentrate on Kristeva and Slavoj Žižek. So the quote from the book says, and there are these vignettes of philosophical ruminations by our hero, Alpha. Any event that surprises a man has already been experienced by other men before him. The effects of all human possibilities have already been felt. Nothing that might happen to us here, as terrible or as felicitous as it might seem, is new. But what we experience is always new because every man is unique, the way every leaf and every tree is unique. Men share with each other the same lifeblood, but each feeds himself from it differently. In order to find yourself in life, to not lose yourself on the path, you must listen to the voice of duty. Even if the new isn't really new, it's always new for those who ceaselessly wash up on the world's shores, generation after generation. T.S. Eliot had the same thing to say about no author standing alone and claiming originality and complete uniqueness, because each author stands on the shoulders of those who have gone before him. Thank you, Gurudash. Next one, please. So Eliot says, no poet, no artist of any art has his complete meaning alone, because you cannot value art, you cannot value literature alone. You must set the author, contrast and compare amongst the dead ones who have gone before him. The poet's mind is in fact a receptacle for seizing and storing up numberless feelings, phrases and images. And it's the same that is being argued by Alpha in David Diop's novel, that we are all connected. Nothing that we are doing is new. We are all connected to previous generations who have gone before us, suffered the same pain. Yes, please, next one. So this idea of intertextuality, whether you're talking about life or whether you're talking about books or art, is connecting as a cohesive force that connects us to all the various traditions of the past. This lady, Julia Kristeva, in the late 1960s, conceptualized this idea. Rather than the idea that everything has a new expression, is a new feeling, is a unique confession, what the argument that Kristeva and Eliot put to us is that what we see in the book, and which the author himself tells us, as I quoted a little while ago, that we owe whatever we think is new to past generations. Next, please. So another quote that I want to draw your attention to so you understand the place from which our participants will be coming from. Don't tell me that we don't need madness on the battlefield. God's truth, the mad fear nothing. The others, white or black, play at being mad, perform madness so that they can calmly throw themselves in front of the bullets of the enemy on the other side. It allows them to run straight at death without being too afraid. Next, please. So why did this gory, macabre novel win the Booker? This is what the Booker Prize committee says. This book does what the best poetry does, entering the reader's consciousness at a level that bypasses rationality and transcends the subject matter. Yes, indeed, you are reading about horrible mutilations and a soldier going mad, but all the same, the whole tragedy relies on the dichotomy, the duplicity, the doppelganger of the awfulness of what you are being told and the beauty of how it is being expressed. So there is a great deal of pleasure to be had from this novel. Okay, Gurudash, I think we will switch off the PowerPoint, though we have lots more, and lead right into our speakers. So, Dr. Harish Mehta, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, good. So then let's have you launch our discussion today. And as a historian, how would you locate this novel and situate it in the history of the First World War? Dr. Mehta, I'm sorry, but we have very little time. So please, because you're the opener today, 4 to 5 minutes max. Okay? Thank you.
I have only 4 points.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So you asked me to launch the thing. The one way to launch is to issue an order for all of us to jump into the trenches and wait for me to blow the whistle. And when I blow the whistle, you will take out your machetes and lunge at the enemy and do all kinds of stuff to the enemy. Well, that's one way to launch it. The other way to launch it is that to begin, there are, when I read the novel, the two genres of literature that this novel belongs to. And the first, of course, is the genre of African literature, where you have novelists like Ben Okri, Chinua Achebe, Ngugi, and I bring them up principally to point out that this unique African voice that permeates this novel is not new. This is the same voice we find now for 60, 70 years or even more through the writings of all African authors. This very strong African tone. That's the first thing. It's a good book that he's produced, but it's not new. The tone is, we've heard it before. If you read Ben Okri, you're going to get assaulted and consumed by amazing African voices. The second genre it belongs to is the genre of general World War I novels. And one of the best that I've read is by Sebastian Faulks, a novel called Birdsong, which has equally gory descriptions of trench life, of trench warfare, of rat-infested, lice-infected troops, and and all the rest of it. So that's the second thing. So these are the genres. Now, so what the book does is, in a sense, it celebrates killing. It's sort of the killing is described in such detail without the author taking any position on its abhorrent nature. It is described almost in a celebratory tone. The taking, the disembowelment, and the final taking of the 6 hands. And this is again a part of what soldiers are trained to do. Soldiers are trained to kill. And there's a book by this scholar called Joanna Burke called An Intimate History of Killing, in which she interviewed combatants from the World Wars and the Vietnam War. And many of them told her that the act of killing was joyful, pleasurable, exciting, orgasmic. Some of them said that the guys who, at the point when they, shot the guy or they decapitated him, it was orgasmic. So these are actually things that soldiers say, and these are not murderers, but these are trained soldiers uh, who are trained to kill, and then and on the battlefield they find that killing becomes a highly sexualized activity. Other scholars have long pointed out that two male figures lunging at each other with their bayonets drawn is homoerotic. This is a very old image, and people have written a great deal about homoeroticism in the battlefield. Uh, so finally, trophy taking. The cutting of hands, noses, and ears is not new. It is as old as warfare. It's as thousands of years ago, soldiers used to cut off fingers and ears, and some would even make garlands out of them and wear them. You know, so if you think that the cutting of 6 hands is bizarre, well, it's happened before. Uh, and in the deep American South, where Africans were lynched. When I was teaching a course some years ago on human rights, in my research, I found that after they hung the black man from a tree, they would then later you'd find his fingers being sold outside the white man's churches. The lynchings happened the day before, the hangings happened on the day of the prayers on Sunday, and after church, the fingers and other body parts of the black man would be on sale. And guess who were the principal instigators for hanging? The women. The white women wanted them hung fast and high. So finally, to come to my fourth point, is the setting of the World War One. The setting is, of course, important, and as Chaitali very rightly pointed out yesterday, that it was all a function of colonialism. None of these boys should have been there dying. 74, almost 75,000 Indian troops died out of the 1 million who were sent to the First World War on ships from Bombay, landing in Marseille, and some landing in the Middle East and then being shipped over to the European theater. Similarly, 30,000 Africans dying. None of them really wanted to be there, but soldiers joined the war for a number of reasons, and one of them is jobs. Because these were colonized countries, they needed some work, and the war offered you an instant commission. You could wear a uniform, you would get 3 meals a day, and you would get about 2 or 3 shillings if you were in the British Army a month. My own father fought in the Second World War. He fought not because he was forced to fight. He fought because he was bored. He fought because he wanted to see action. Here was a young man, a Punjabi boy living in Rawalpindi, who joins the Indian Emergency Commission and is commissioned by Field Marshal Wavell. He proudly displayed his commissioning placard certificate in his study in our home in Lucknow. He went because he wanted to fight. The British never forced him to fight, but he joined as a second lieutenant. So he was an officer when he went to the Second World War. In the First World War, no Indians or colonial troops became officers. It wasn't done. It was only after the First World War that that the British thought at least that, it's high time some of them were elevated. So with that, I thank you, and over to you, Julie.
Thank you, Harish. Very quick takeoff from your point about jouissance, which is the pleasure got from watching people suffer or die. A great theory which is expounded by Slavoj Žižek. I could not spend time on my PowerPoint because I have so many of you to jump in, but this is a very important point about war and how war has become an example of the kind of very warped idea of orgasmic sexual pleasure. And this comes from the Second World War documents of Nazi officers watching the gassing of the Jews and how they felt sexually aroused. So that is a, that is a point which is neglected. We don't talk about it, but I'm glad you brought it up. And so many other issues about your personal history, which intersects with the history of the war. Thank you, Harish. Choitali, are you here, my dear?
Hello.
Hi, Choitali. Welcome aboard.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes, go right ahead. Waiting for you.
Okay. Right. So, first of all, a big thanks for me read this book, or it was a wonderful experience trying to read this book. And whoever are here, they all know that this book is full of bloodshed. It is full of words like maim, decapitate, disembowel, words which definitely put you off when you are in the reading mode. So once that happened to me also quite a few times, but once the book reading was done, certain thoughts crossed my mind, which I want to share. Number one is that somewhere a deconstructionist reading is forced in the novel, and alpha becomes a transcendental signifier whose presence in the language refers to something very external. He can also be conceived in terms of presence, and his characterization, or I mean, it's first person narrative, but this has the status of the eternal, and it is the final reference of the discourse. I also felt that two foundations of time have been used in the novel. One is the time of duration, when he is trying to kill, when he is trying to cut the hands. And then it is also the time of the instant, when he is remembering his family life, when he is feeling a sense of fulfillment. And this leads me to the third point, where I think the very evil and the very happy is dovetailed in the novel. So a nexus between words like God, -conscience, -evil, -good, -duty, I don't know how many more words. See, all these words which we do not think of in one breath is established. The narrative is so powerful that it sort of creates a sense of flux. It identifies tensions of the warfield, tensions of the man within, tensions of the man and woman relationship, tensions in the family. And yet the entire presentation is so controlled, so full of suggestiveness, persuasiveness, that it establishes the binary, so Derridian, between speech and writing, and mixes them and creates a flux which makes one ask question whether we are also linked up to such a warfield. As I had said before, Julie, that the First World War becomes very contextual, but that is not what the book is trying to do. The First World War is just a context. The book is trying to hint and discover much, much more. That's it. I think I've taken more time. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you so much, Choitali, as always on point, beautiful, comprehensive overview. And I couldn't agree with you more. I was just talking to Harish last night. We were discussing how chapter 14 is really like the Bhagavad Gita.
Yes.
So,
yes.
you know, it gives you that dimension of, you know, how Alpha says, I am life and I am death. So it's almost that philosophy which strikes you, that there is sex, there is love, there is war. It's almost as if it's happening. It's happening in everybody's life in a different way. Thank you so much, Choitali. Vivek, are you ready? Then we will hear you now.
Yeah, I'm ready. You can hear me?
Go ahead, yes.
Okay, so some of the points I was going to say, start off with, it is an anti-war story. Racism, inhumanity, colonial stereotypes, of course, disembowelment, amputation, PTSD, descent into madness, and finally into a psychiatric facility. As in many of the best novels of active combat, Diop accentuates tragedy with bitter irony. I have to say, I was haunted by strange feelings that gripped me while reading this book. And I spent several restless nights, my mind overwrought by troubled thoughts. Jesse Stevens writes, it is at once a deeply violent and gentle book. Blending modernist monologue with myth, Diop explores the disturbing outer limits of what we do to others and of what war can do to us. The author does something astonishing in his novel. He describes the war with such a skillful turn of phrase that all the repulsive savagery becomes secondary to his use of language. The book stands testament to inspired English translation by Anna Moskowitz. It is Alpha Ndiaye's first-person narrative that forces us to view the violence through our own eyes and makes it explicit. The way Diop conveys Alpha's fevered thoughts and feelings is absolutely riveting. Even the explicit scenes aren't gratuitous. They are there to make a point. Even the placement of the wounds are symbolic. I quote, 3 times he asked me to finish him off. 3 times I refused. This was before I allowed myself to think anything I want. If I had been then what I have become today, I would have killed him the first time he asked. His head turned towards me, his left hand in my right. The 3 times in the quotation recalls both Odysseus and Aeneas, respectively, striving to hold their dead mother and father in the underworld, as well as the motive of betrayal in the Bible. In the second half of the book, Diop uses the device of psychotherapy, and stories within stories emerge, revealing Alpha's mother and the more than brotherhood of Alpha and Mademba. The language becomes lyrical, describing his beautiful mother and the experience of separation from her son and her husband and her birth family. God's truth, I knew, I understood. I figured out how, with a simple pencil on paper, I could tell Dr. Francois how my beautiful, my Fula mother was with heavy gold twists hanging from her ears and thin circles of red gold piercing the wings of her hooked nose. God's truth, I believe that in my drawing was so vivid that Dr. Francois heard my mother say from her sketched mouth that she was gone, but that she had not forgotten me, that she loves me still. The narration mirrors oral tradition, works with mantra-like repetitions that are reminiscent of a religious litany or a folk song. The thing you notice right away is the repetitive nature of the prose, with phrases like, I know, I understand, and God's truth, giving Alpha's mental meanderings and anguish a sort of rhythm. Sentences circle back into one another, words recur over and over again. Imagery and plot points are constantly brought into play. He says, I am as much the wriggling fish as the still canoe, as much the net as the fisherman. I am the prisoner and his guard. I am the tree and the seed that grew into it. I am father and son. I am assassin and judge. I am innocent and guilty. I am the beginning and the end. I am the creator and the destroyer. I am double. As you rightly noted, this is something straight out of Hindu philosophy and what the messages have been written in the holy books. At the end, we reach the ultimate duality of Alpha's mind and body, giving life to Mademba, so that he's hosting and living for both of them. I know, I understand that Alpha heard the first supplication I uttered in the depths of no man's land on the night of my death, because I didn't want to be left alone in the middle of nowhere, in a land without a name. God's truth, I swear to you that now, whenever I think of us, he is me and I am him. Thank you.
Beautiful incantatory,
Very nice.
beautiful incantatory points brought out and how it works. And the fact I liked very much about your presentation, Vivek, is that you brought out that the story is about language, and Alpha does not speak much French. So it is a story written in French, which we read in English about a man thinking in Wolof, in their language. And it's very oral in its tradition, as you point out. And Diop has done something very clever in creating a kind of mantra or incantatory language. It somehow conveys that sense of what it is like to think outside your language. I think that's very smart. Goes back to Harish's point about African literature and why it is so special that he's carried on that tradition. So now I think it's a good time if we can move on. And we have Dr. Paramita Mukherjee. Paramita, are you here, dear? I think I
Yes,
saw
I am. Yes, I am.
Lovely. Now,
Good evening.
I am waiting, good evening, with bated breath to hear what it is that is positive, as you always find in a text. Go ahead.
Thank you, Julie Deep. But I must say, every time when you introduce the book, you know, it gives a new meaning to the book. So thank you so much for the way you research and give us a total background of the book, you know. It immediately when we go through the book and when we see your research and the background of the book, it gives us a new horizon. It gives us a new thought in our mind. So thank you so much, Julie Deep. Narrative is absolutely awesome here. The narrative is awesome. The way he writes, Diop writes, it's amazing. So clear, clarity of words, clarity of language, and the arrangement of, you know, situations is so very clear. Imagery is absolutely beautiful, like say, reconciling the rooted trees and the wind that rustles the leaves. So these imageries, me as a poet, I loved it. And then the life lessons where he says, we never abandon those who gave us life. Such beautiful life lessons, you know, hidden in between the writing. So it's amazing. And of course, like Vivek ji said just now, it's a total anti-war story. Once you read what is war, you never want war. Once you read the horror, the terrible situation, what happens in the battlefield, you as a human being humanity will not want war again. So it's a total anti-war book. And I love the way, again, he describes being brave or courageous. He describes himself, Alpha, as a very handsome man with broad shoulders. And then he compares his friend Medemba, like he is a weakling. He has narrow shoulders, but basically he has mental strength. That's what he tried to say, that mental strength is far more important than physical strength or physical beauty. So these things are the positive things which I really liked about this book. It was a very good read, very good read. Language is awesome, absolutely. Thank you.
Paramita, you never stop surprising me. And, you know, you can see, I think we can see by now, after so many meetings with you, that the language becomes so important, you know, the images that you reconstruct in your presentation and what appealed to you. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate that. Anju, looking forward. Anju, are you here?
Yes, I'm very much here. Thank
Lovely.
you, Julie.
Lovely. Go ahead.
Well, the first, I think 50 pages of the book were, I didn't know what I was reading and why was I reading it, but slowly the jigsaw pieces, you know, fell into place and there was a kind of a meaning, a cohesiveness to the whole story. It's the story of an overwhelming impact of war and its trauma on a young, fragile mind. It's the story of a frenzied mind, which takes a very schizophrenic view of human relationships and the world at large. And I think it's a very powerful insight into the psychology of a disturbed mind. To me, I think it occurs to me as a psychological warfare, you know, more than anything else. The war within ourselves and the war within our mind. A young, fragile mind affected by the tragic experience of the loss or the separation from his mother. And throughout the book, we see a lot of separation anxiety. There's a separation anxiety which is noticeable when he gets separated from his friends, his workmates, the trench mates. a fairy, his girlfriend, his commander, his more than brother, his mother, his father. There is a separation anxiety thread which runs throughout, which I thought was very poignant. Then he calls his father a soldier of everyday life, which means that life is a war which everybody fights and which his father is fighting also, and he's a soldier in this war. And he also says that the pain of absence is very much like the pain of hunger. So both the pains have a kind of, they are as intense as one another, the pain of hunger and the pain of absence. And he says this in relation to his mother. And his description of his father as an immutable landscape compared to his mother, who is a changing sky, the daughter of the wind. I think when he talks of his father as immobile as a tree, is speaking about orthodoxy, and his mother changing like sky and daughter of the wind is got a more liberal outlook. It is very touching. And he says that it's quote, memory of my mother calcified the entire surface of my mind. So, well, so it is the calcification of a normal thought process, a normal mental process. It's a calcification which is happening. Like the speaker before me said that there is, he thinks that he's better than his more than brother. There is, I think, an urgent need for recognition. He's always saying that I'm more handsome. Everybody's eyes tell me so. Fairy Thiam's eyes tell me so. The eyes of Madamba Diop say so. So there is an urgent need for recognition, which he thinks he hasn't been given. And also that fairy chose me over Madamba. And there is also an undercurrent of Oedipus complex. And I think this is the way I felt. This could be felt in different segments, more so, prominently so in the story of Fickle Princess. To me, it appears a fading, a merging of mother and fairy into one body. I think so. The ending is liberated, almost like a transcendental release. I'm the beginning, I'm the end. There is a very strong note of transcendentalism here, creator and destroyer, both death and life. And now the reader actually breathes easy and in relief. It is a disturbingly different book, or let me say, a differently disturbing book. And to be very honest, towards the end, I liked it. Thank you.
Thank you, Anju. And I think what we all celebrate in this perspective of yours is that despite all the blood and all the gore, there is that very strong winning streak of the positive force. To go back to Parumita's, psyche, I think what you've done a great job is the unpackaging of the psychoanalysis. Freud would be proud of you. And bringing in front that family and love and longing of people that you love. Those are the remaining gems that stay with you. Perhaps in the Indic, in the Indic philosophy, where I am life and I am death. So the past, the present, and the future once again have an intertextuality between them. Thank you so much, Anju. Thank you. Meher, are you here? Meher Diku Naroji? Meher?
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful, Diku. Would you like to say a few words?
Yes, I must say this book has been quite a revelation to me, because I found that I understood much more of the book by listening to you than I did whilst the reading of it. When I read it, I thought it was the bloodiest book I've ever read. I wanted to get rid of it. And I phoned a friend and said, "You've ordered this book?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Well, cancel your order, because I'm giving it to you as a gift." Now, having done that, I read it and I found it very distinctly in two parts. The first half was bloody and active. The second part was very ethereal and peaceful. And I must say, I rather heaved a sigh of relief when we came to the second part. As far as the style is concerned, I disagree with most people in this, including the Booker Committee, because I felt that the style was not agreeable, not nice, not, it was powerful, certainly, and it was raw, but I found it too repetitive to be interesting for me. At the same time, when I heard you, Julie, describe the environment of the book, and when I heard the other speakers speak, I found that very, very interesting. It took me back to my student days when we'd actually sit and analyze books, which I don't do much now. I just read. Yeah, but it was an interesting book, but I wouldn't care to revisit it. It was a book that made a statement, but I almost didn't want to read it. You know what I mean? It was not, I didn't enjoy it. I did not assimilate it. I found it actually repugnant. But I should not, because what I'm really saying is I don't like things that are disagreeable. I don't like things that are, harsh, and that's not right. So that's that. And it's a very, very strange thing to say, but I actually did not enjoy it. Oh, I've got the camera the other way. I must say I didn't enjoy it much, not at all. But I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it in the listening to you. You know, that has been very important to me, and I found that terribly interesting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Diku. What I have to say to you is that I am actually surprised that so many of the people who are participating today are very pro the book. And you and I think, are somewhat in the minority, but I understand exactly where you're coming from. But it is my job, I take it as my job as a student of literature, as a scholar of literature, to give all voices a hearing. Because when I read it a couple of times before today, I must say that at various points, my perception changed. And as you quite rightly say, we come with certain beliefs, as we do in everything in life. And when there's a mismatch to that expectation, then you really wonder, hey, he got the Booker for what? But I think this is what an exploration together does. It gives you different perspectives. And I have learned at every point from Vivek, from Paramita, Choitali, Harish, you, everyone, So Anju, of course, the psychological part of it. So yeah, I do agree with you. Different voices, different strokes, different folks, absolutely. Dr. Sharbani Ghosh, are you present here? Possibly not. Okay, Sangeeta and then Olivia. And then we move on to our esteemed guests. Sangeeta Kichlu, welcome, welcome.
Good evening, Judy.
Good evening, very good evening.
Good evening, everybody. I hope I'm clear. Yeah, so I'll be very short too. So this book started like a brutal bombshell. Boom. The imagery was detailed and cruel, and it was all triggered off by the death of Alpha's more than half brother, the disembowelment of his brother in front of him, and of him not being able to kill him, sort of cut his neck as he requested him to. So the first part of the book, the gruesomeness, was almost like an atonement for him not being able to do what his more than brother asked him to do. Now, we've all spoken about this brutality and, this repetitive of more than half brother by God's truth, more than half brother. It like sets the tempo for why he's repeating this this phrase. And the book really moves from the macabre to the moving. And as Diku said, I found a distinct shift in mood after around page 90. And I must say, I enjoyed the second part of the book because it gave a perspective, it gave a context to the beginning of the book. Now, why did he keep on saying more than half brother? Because Alpha was Mademba's brother by choice, not by birth. And I think that is more than being a brother by birth. He adopted Alpha. He embraced him. And, you know, the way he took him from his mother and how they would travel up north just in case she came back. And this whole second half where they describe the growing up years of, sorry, my phone is, oh, shucks, very irritating. Yeah, the growing up years, you know, the background where they came from. And these boys, again, as you introduced in the beginning, you know, about the colonization, how the Africans were exploited. First of all, who would even think of Senegalese soldiers fighting for the French? This is highlighted here. And then, as you said, there were 2 million Africans who lost their lives in the First World War. I mean, these are things that go forgotten. The other thing is, why did they want to join the war? They didn't want to join the war to die. They wanted to join the war because they wanted a better life for themselves. In St. Louis, they wanted to go there and start a trading business so that they could give a better life to their family. So that is where they came from. They were not going with valor and with, you know, there was no jingoistic feeling. They were just going as a profession, you know, and so that accentuates the tragedy even more because they did not go to die. They did not go out of patriotism. They actually went for a better life, but Mademba died. And right at the end of the book, and I kept on questioning that, you know, he keeps on carrying Mademba with him. And it's almost like he transports Mademba's soul into his being and lives the rest of his life with Mademba as half of him. And the book ends with, my eyes are so bad, I can't even read the book. You know, the last line, which I think everybody's quoted. And I swear to you now, whenever I think of us, he is me and I am him. So although he physically died, Mademba continued to live in Alpha forever. So that was my take on the book.
Superb. And you focused completely on that issue of carrying my, you know, more than brother into himself. So you're actually pointing to a skill in literature, Sangeeta, called the doppelganger. You know, the doppelganger, the double of each of us, you know. So Mademba and Alpha, the question that arises in academia is, are they then the same? Are they then two sides of the same
person?
Yes. So that's an excellent point you brought up. I was wondering, I was keeping quiet to see
because he was strong and you know, handsome, and he always outdid him physically, but Mademba was studious and he always studied. So there were different personalities, but a composite whole.
A composite whole, yes. Lovely. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sangeeta.
Thank you, Julie.
I'm looking forward to Olivia Carr, one of our youngest members of the Bengal Club. Olivia, are you there today? Gurudas, do you see Olivia Carr on the list at all?
No, ma'am.
Don't. Okay. All right. We'll move on then to our esteemed guests. The first one I have on my list is Mrs. Ritu Gulati. She is an old dear friend. She's an art curator, art historian. Love to hear your views, Ritu, on the book.
Okay, I just wrote down what I'm going to say so that I'm staying within the time. So anyway, before I started reading this book, I searched for reviews for this little known Senegalese author. And the one that I liked the most, which led me onto it, was if a measure of a book's success is to be quite unlike anything else, then David Diop's book is. So I started reading this book, searching for that quite unlike anything else, and boy, did I get so much of it. It reads like the diary of a disturbed person who's struggling with various tormenting emotions and responding to them in a savage-like manner. The gory details of savagery become even more profound by the repetitive use of phrases like, I know, I understand, God's truth, accentuating his pain. He's dealing with several emotional and psychological battles within himself, one being the guilt of watching his more than brother Madumba suffer a graphically described excruciating death, rather than listen to his brother pleading to him to end his life by slashing his throat. The second struggle he's having is with the question of what indeed is duty and morality, when it is this duty that actually left his brother in so much pain. And here I'm reminded of the endless debate on euthanasia, and the first few chapters probably serve as a case study in favor of euthanasia. And I'm also reminded, like Julie said, of the Mahabharata, where Arjun asks Krishna, what is the duty? How can I do this? The third is the trauma of your own self-respect, of being sucked out of you by the tyrannous colonists. And you're being forced to fight for an enemy that is not really yours, that is not really your own enemy. While the first few chapters leave the reader feeling nauseated by the explicitly described savagery, the book then moves on to a more humane side of Alpha, where he reveals his childhood, his love Fari, his parents, through his drawings for Dr. Francois. The book is interspersed with glimpses of African culture through revelations of totems, talismans, brotherhood, and the language used resonates African culture, which all of you have said, and the repetition is poetically used to accentuate these emotions. But the only chapter that I struggled with is the last one, with the lion sorcerer and the fickle lover. I believe this follows Roland Barthes' literary style, which he described in his 1967 essay called Death of an Author, where the essential meaning of a text lies in the impressions and the interpretations of the reader, and the author has liberated himself from giving a singular conclusive meaning to his writing. As an art advisor who spent so much time finding the veiled symbols in a painting, reading this book was equally fascinating. And I must admit, I read the last chapter 3 times, searching for this meaning and the symbols. My own interpretation, and I will end here, is that there is a reversal of roles, like a lot of you all commented. Alpha now becomes Madumba, whose death he's consumed by in the entire novel. The last line was the symbol, my symbol for leading me to this, where he says, again, repetition of what all of you have said, whenever I think of us, he is me and I am him. The book certainly deserves the Booker, and as it is relevant to the current environment of various social movements like racism, euthanasia, colonial atrocities, and mental health, etc., etc.
Brilliant, brilliant. Loved your harking back to Roland Barthes. And I personally think that that is what many of us should take away with us today. What Ritu has been talking about is handing over the death of an author becomes the birth of the reader. So the death of the painter is the birth of a viewer. Am I right, Ritu?
Yep.
To be able to...
We are interpreting it, yes.
Yes. So the importance of the reader is brought to bear in this text a great deal, because he leaves the ending open-ended. Yesterday, Sangeeta and I were trying to come to some sort of conclusion. And then Ritu, you called and we had a conversation. But I still am not sure what has transpired. How is it concluded? So, it's still open-ended, and it's each of our interpretation, which makes this quite rightly, a novel of a great elevated status. And I loved your views on colonialism. I loved your very unique view on euthanasia. So thank you for that, Ritu. Harsh, are you here? Mr. Harsh Kumar Singh?
Hello, yes, I am here.
Wonderful, one of our youngest scholars. And
Am I audible?
yes, you're very audible. So go right ahead. And
Okay.
looking forward to a unique presentation. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'll ask ma'am if I'm permitted to share my screen to show certain visuals, if you allow.
Absolutely. Go right ahead.
Okay. So it says the host has disabled participant screen sharing. So can it be removed in any way?
Gurudash, can we have the screen to be shared by Mr. Harsh Kumar Singh?
Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Gurudash. Is it better now, Harsh?
Just a
Not
minute.
really.
Just a minute.
Not really.
Just a minute.
He's working on it.
Yeah,
it's okay.
you go on.
Okay. Thank
You
you.
can right.
Okay, yeah. Is my screen visible to everyone? Okay. So
yes,
I read At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. And being someone who has played and studied a lot of video games, I cannot help but draw parallels to the scenes of some games and the philosophy and dialogues of various characters, which show the real futility of war. So we find Nico Bellic in the Grand Theft Auto 4, who correctly speaks about war. And he says that war is when the young and stupid are tricked by the old and bitter into killing each other. Truly, the world was with the darkest of times for the mankind. The tension, the anxiety, the mutilate seen by soldiers was one that we cannot even fathom or imagine. Alpha's assertion in the novel, for everyone, for the soldiers both black and white, I have become death, not only brings to mind J. Robert Oppenheimer, the father of the atomic bomb, who quoted, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds," but also Max Payne 3, a video game featuring a New York City police detective who is driven into vengeance when his wife and children are murdered by drug dealers. And the protagonist narrator says, "So I guess I'd become what they wanted me to be, a killer, some rent-a-clown with a gun who put holes in other bad guys. Here I was about to execute this poor bastard like some dime store angel of death, and I realized they were correct. I wouldn't know right from wrong if one of them was helping the poor and the other was banging my sister." David Diop has shown the futility of soldiers giving up their lives in the war, for it is an honorable deed. To get medals like the Croix de Guerre, its faint echoes are heard in a game called Mass Effect 3, and it is set in a future where humans and soldiers have colonized the Milky Way. Javik, who is the last survivor of the Prothean race, tells Commander Shepard, a line, "Stand amongst the ashes of 1,000,000,000 dead souls and ask the ghosts if honor matters. Their silence is your answer." Truly, soldiers who fought in the war were told that they are serving their country, and the war itself was called the Great War. But after casualties of around 120 million after both the wars, really, does honor matter? Although Johann Huizinga in his Homo Ludens famously argues that any form of playing is essentially not a serious activity, these games have often become an audiovisual and interactive form of modern pedagogy. In the game Call of Duty 2, when the Russian soldiers are trained to throw grenades, they are given potatoes. A soldier says, "But these are potatoes, Comrade Commissar. Why are we using potatoes instead of real grenades?" And the commissar says, "Because real grenades are valuable. In fact, they are worth a lot more than you are." Even the Tubab soldiers who chose not to fight anymore in the novel were made an example of, with their hands tied up in their backs and forced to either walk out of the trenches or be shot at by the enemies. or be shot at by the Chocolat soldiers. Truly, their lives are worth nothing. I would end my talk here with a video from Call of Duty World War II, where the landing of troops in Normandy is shown from the perspective of a soldier who shows how the soldiers were dehumanized and made savage, just like in Alpha's words, the captain's France needs our savagery. Can you guys hear the audio from the video? Okay.
I can hear. I can hear. Not very clear though.
You need to increase the volume.
Yeah. Just
Can't hear.
check the box also in the sharing. When you are sharing, check that 2 boxes.
yeah, just tell me if it works now.
Yes.
Perfect.
Over the side! Take the Bangalore and get to the seawall! We have a clear path to the bunker! Daniels! This is what you trained for! Now pick up that banger! You can do this! Yes, sir!
Thank you for listening to me and giving me an opportunity to speak.
Harsh, you've really raised the bar. You've opened up so many new windows for us. I really don't know how to thank you. And this is why I think scholars such as you, who are at the cutting edge of literary criticism, are doing a great favor to many of us who are pitched on different levels with literature. So thanks from all of us. I think we all, we are all the better informed. We are subject to thinking about Diop's book on another level, which balances, which textures us. Thank you so very much. Thank you, Harsh. Look forward to Vinod Pillai. Vinod, are you here?
Hi, Julie, I'm here. Yeah, very much.
Hi, Vinod. Yeah, looking forward. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Julie, and good evening, everyone. I went through this book, I mean, listening to all these experiences that have been shared. Yeah, they're all very different experiences. And in my case, what happened was the initial reading was very disturbing, like a lot of people have talked about it. And then the second half, left me very confused. So I did a reread all over again because there were many questions. And what I did was try to check up on what the author has to say about the book. And I came across an interview at the Edinburgh International Festival where David Diop says that I started off with my character in an extreme situation, a situation of extreme violence, extreme physical violence, but also extreme psychological violence. So it is an impossible situation. The character does not know whether he should accept to carry out what his closest friend, his more than brother, is asking him to do, that is to kill him to end his sufferings, or whether he should do nothing in order to have the death of his more than brother on his conscience. And so it means that it is dead end from the start. And I wanted to base my novel on this initial insoluble traumatism. And you get the impression, because the character goes over and over this question, that the novel moves forward and back ceaselessly. What I wanted to do, in a sense, was to compel the reader to think about the very narrow frontier that is between what is human and what is inhuman. When I read this, suddenly everything started falling in place in a very different way. I also came across this interesting fact that the original French title, because it was originally written in French, the French title was Frère d'âme, which translates to soul brother. So no, the English title is very different. It takes you straight to war and killing and things like that. Whereas this focuses on the soul brother. So I thought there must be something about it. Also, the story begins with an ellipsis. So it's a very abrupt beginning. What I felt after when I went through this rereading is that that war is just a context. And, the story is set in motion by Alpha's guilt. It's an extreme kind of situation where he's forced to think about whatever he's thinking, about what is humanity, what is inhumanity, what is sanity, what is insanity, and to throw before us the kind of dualities and dichotomies that are all around us, and where we take individual positions and do not resolve it. We don't resolve it. We just take a position and say war is good or war is bad or war is necessary, or this is what sanity is and this is what insanity is. If all of us agree that somebody is insane, we'll say he's insane, which is what is happening there. Alpha was considered, a hero, and suddenly he becomes mad. So these are the questions that come. Who's the enemy? Is it the Germans or is it Captain Armand, who, his behavior would make him seem to be the enemy? So there are all these questions that come up, and I think Diop is compelling us to think about the frontier between humanity and inhumanity, and also look at all these dualities in us. And for me, the ending of the book seems to be, coming together of all the fragments, the gestalt being achieved, right in the end. And but I haven't made up my mind about the full book now. I think it's going somewhere there, but I need to also think whether Madamba was a real person or it was just another side of him. I'll probably need to do a few more rereads to, figure out what he was trying to convey. So that is what I felt. I felt it's not much about war. War is the context, and it's basically the exploration of one's mind and the way one's looking at things. That's what I felt. I felt it was a great book because it didn't allow me to conclude. I've done rereads, but I've still not concluded. So thank you very much, Julie.
Vinod, what can I say? Your years as Harish's very dear friend, I can see why he thinks so highly of you. You've brought a metaphysical musings of Alpha's mind, which connects very well with what Anju Munshi was telling us towards the beginning. And what you've done is you've opened up again another way to look at what this book is about, because honestly, now that I've heard you, it indeed is about the French original title was about the soul brother. Yeah. So he was not thinking about war. Yes. And then not the kind of war that is in the trenches necessarily. It is a war within. It is a war that has been become endemic to our living in a world which was colonized, now decolonized, but our minds are still colonized. So I think you brought a great quotient to this discussion, and I thank you for it, Vinod. I'm not letting you go. You're going to be a part of our Bengal Club book group. I hope you'll agree. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. It's wonderful listening to the speakers.
Sana Hashmi, all the way from Toronto. Are you here?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Are your bags all packed for Colombia or still getting there?
Almost. I have a few weeks more to go.
Good.
But I've started.
Go ahead, Sana.
Okay, so I just want to begin by sharing a passage that really stood out to me in this novel. So this is when Alpha says, "But I, Alpha NDA, I understand the true meaning of the captain's words. No one knows what I think. I am free to think whatever I want. And what I think is that people don't want me to think. The unthinkable is what is hidden behind the captain's words. The captains France needs for us to play the savage when it suits them. The only difference between them, so here he's referring to the other African soldiers from different tribes, and me is that I became a savage intentionally. They play a role only when they crawl out from the earth, but I play a role only with them inside our sheltering trench. So based on the English translation in the original French, I think this quote, both in its depth of language and its content, speaks to a major theme for me in this novel, which is the contrast between exteriors and interiors. For example, in the quote, the author repeats the word translated to English as think and uses the word intention, and also draws our attention to the physical outside of the trench, contrasted with Alpha being inside the trench. So Alpha is quite clear in the above passage that he understands the external perception stereotype that is required of him to be played, and how this contrasts with his own thoughts and his own internal monologue. So I find that interesting throughout the novel, this contrast. Thus, he says quite pointedly, what I think is that people don't want me to think. So outside of the role as soldiers that Alpha speaks to, throughout the novel, we get the story of how Alpha and his friend are grappling with the deep internal feelings of, on the one hand, inadequacy, maybe jealousy, competitiveness felt by his friend, and on the other, the guilt and subsequent madness that is felt by Alpha, while both maintain a deep love for each other. So I found that was a very interesting plot in this novel. And we get this theme again when we read about Alpha's deep guilt about how he believes that his joke about his friend led him to being killed, in his opinion, and Alpha's motives behind not putting an end to his misery as he lay dying. So throughout the novel, he's just ruminating on that over and over again, that guilt that he's feeling. So that speaks again to this contrast between inside and outside. And at the end, we are given his friend's final assessment of the situation, where he ascribes his own forgiving interpretation of why Alpha did not kill him sooner. So I think, just to conclude, this is just, the novel is very interesting, and it does a great job of showing the deep feelings between these two soldiers fighting in the First World War, and how this deep interiority is contrasted by the external perceptions of them, and how they're aware of these perceptions at the same time. Thank you.
As usual, you bring so much newness in looking at this book, which to us, all of us, I think was quite frightening. And while reading it at points, I think, like the Booker Committee, all of us were hypnotized and emotions all jangled up. And as you say, your mind is being opened up to new thoughts, Sana. But it is an extraordinary piece of narrative too, isn't it? Compelling.
Yes.
And as you said, the issue of guilt, which haunts Alpha, the protagonist, who's accused of sorcery. And I think it's compelling in a way that is at once where it shows the duality and the fight between the inner selves within us, the evil and the good, and then the question of what is duty. In the line of duty, what does that mean? The church tells us the ethics of the world that we grew up with tell us, do not kill. And yet, Madamba is in such dire straits. He's disemboweled. He's been in a state of terrible pain and suffering, and yet Alpha doesn't want to kill him, because in his line of duty, he's ready to kill the German soldier. And you brought this up very well. It is the mixed message of right and wrong, of ethics, and the guilt that follows this confusion. Great, great points, Sana. Really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. Our last speaker today on the Our last speaker is Roma Bhattacharya. Roma, are you here?
Yes, good evening, Julie. Can you hear me?
Yes, Roma. Wonderful to have you on board.
Go
Such a
right ahead.
pleasure.
Yeah, you've been
And-
busy with a lot of films today.
I was busy, yes. I'm so happy to join in. Good evening to the Bengal Club and you, Julie. Thank you for inviting me. I have to confess it was daunting to start reading this book, having known firsthand war-torn societies in the Dr. Zhivago kind of settings, rebuilding lives, societies, and nations after armed conflict for the United Nations worldwide. The trauma and lives of folk like Alpha Nader and child soldiers are well known to me. I was also part of cutting-edge studies and research at Oxford University, and yesterday was Hiroshima Day, and yet, sadly, we continue with armed conflict ravaging lives. For tonight, I would like to share some small reflections and questions. First, right at the outset, we are signaled by the author that the book will be about the unthinkable. And indeed, the book is a powerful anti-war book, which many of you have discussed, and takes on received notions of war, bravery, masculinity, martial prowess, the body's tech, heroism, courage, military code of conduct, and so on, including us witnessing ones who are the brave and true pissing in their pants as they are shot by those who are promised the highest French honor, the Croix de Guerre, and so on. But second, and more interestingly, the book is a book on discourse itself, a discursive journey, how we think about race, colonization, empire, epistemology, the human condition, God, and meaning is rendered problematic. The kind of Franz Fanon colorization of negritude might appear too simplistic. Even within the natives, there are cross currents. The book is relentless in its interrogation of received categories of human thinking about what constitutes civilization. What is truly creative and unique in this manner in which tale is told, the overriding imagery, which we've all discussed, of disemboweled body with the entrails exposed and the seven hands, they haunt and disembowel our comfort zone long after one has read the book. However, I'd like to end the question to myself, really, how original are the metaphysical questions? Have we encountered these in the core characters of Greek tragedy, Cassandra, the Greek and Roman epic, Shakespeare, and nothing is but what is not, and later anti-war literature? My question to post-colonial scholars is, how post-colonial is the notion of the alienated exile, outsider, who write from an epistemological no man's land? Thank you.
Roma, your lived experience and your scholarship in Oxford, your time in war zones with the United Nations, I should mention, have come to bear on the questions that you've asked and on the observations you have made. I'd like to pick up on two things, and then I think we have 5 minutes for the floor to pick up on anything that anyone would like. And that is, Roma, I have a question for you. And that question is, in your reading of all these war zones that you have visited or you have reported on or analyzed, what is it that the colonial construct of using the human body for its own use has now been transliterated into a neo-colonialism kind of setup, where countries are sending their own people to war for the fulfillment of some strange satisfaction of the ruling elite or the ruling powers that be? So do you think it is a kind of colonialism that is taking on a new avatar?
Julie, you've spoken to issues very close to my heart, and I tried to be very diplomatic by saying yesterday was Hiroshima Day, and by saying that for me, I speak not just as somebody who's seen the Alpha-Nade's lives being turned upside down, not just their entrails, but whole societies ravaged by war. All I can say is it is far more aggressive now. That's my personal point of view. And it is discursive. There is the physical war going on, but there is a much bigger war. And that is what I wouldn't even call it neo-colonial, because we are used to neo-colonialism from the 90s. This is neo-colonialism, where it is, we're part of it. Let me put it as bluntly as possible. You and I are complicit in this. I'm sorry to put it so bluntly, but that's how terrifying. The theater is no longer the battlefield or the war zone. The Greek and Trojan army standing face to face. Sorry, that's passé for me. You and I are part of the theater. That is how all pervasive it is today. Sorry for being so frank.
Perfect, spot on. And as I say today, I think each one, as Dr. Gautam Shah has said in the chat box, each one of us has tried to hit it out of the ballpark. I think war is not going away very soon from our psyche. It's here to stay. So hopefully we will learn the lessons. Anyone want to chip in and put your, your views on the platform? Please do.
I just want to say something for 30 seconds. And this is, since you're talking about a world without war, in the interwar years, between World War I and II, after the shocking experience of the massive amounts of deaths in the First World War, there were two diplomats, one from America and one from France, Mr. Kellogg and Mr. Briand. And they got together and they created what was famously called the Global No War Pact. It was called the Kellogg-Briand Pact. The pact was, they wanted to have a world. They wanted all the countries in the world to sign on to this agreement where there would be no war. But they were laughed out. The Brits didn't want it. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted a world without war. And war, and if you look at the text of the Kellogg-Briand Pact, you will find that it imposes heavy damages on those countries that will start a war. So this was and the Kellogg-Briand Pact died. So that's all I wanted to say. And then Woodrow Wilson in 1919, he came out with his 14 points, where he said that the reason why the World War I broke out was because of those abhorrent secret treaties between the European powers. And he called for open covenants, by which he meant that open diplomacy. He called for a world without colonialism, but he was speaking from three sides of his two mouths. He was speaking from the partly from the left hand, from the left side of his right wing mouth. He was only talking about the ending of colonization only in certain areas where the interests of the Western powers were not affected. So anyway, so Woodrow Wilson had this grand idea of open covenants, a world without war, a League of Nations he wanted to create, which then flopped. And the Kellogg-Briand Pact wanted to create a world without war, which also flopped. And the world lurches into the Second World War. So it took us 2 world wars to finally reach the United Nations, which in the end turns out to be a talking shop. The famous Bretton Woods agreements, a talking shop where the permanent 5 have all the powers in all the committees to stonewall anything. So the Uyghurs in China, nothing is happening there. Who's killing Uyghurs? Tibet, they're forgotten about. Palestine is a forgotten cause. So it goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Harish. Thank you. Raka, are you around?
Hi, ma'am. Am I visible and audible?
You're not visible, but you're audible. Go ahead. Now you're visible and audible. Okay, Raka. So what's your take? We missed you today.
Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you. Can hear you. So what's your take of the discussions today? Any comments on the abject? Can't hear you.
I thoroughly enjoyed.
Can't hear you, Raka.
Can you hear me now, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry, my net is terribly unstable today, but I enjoyed.
Don't worry, just go ahead while we've got you.
I enjoyed all the discussions. I mean, from deconstruction, Derrida, Roma Bhattacharya, and then obviously the Harsh's presentation on the video games was very unique, a fresh take, and also so many debates. And this, having read only the summary of this novel, which is not doing justice to it at all, I think what really I take back from this novel is the horror of war. And Harsh mentioned a quote in his presentation about the silences of the dead soldiers. And it immediately made me think of Spring Offensive by Wilfred Owen. Why do we not speak of comrades that went under? So that question always haunts us, that war and the horrors of it. And it took me to Waiting for the Barbarians and the barbarity, and Zizek's jouissance, and the idea that Etienne Baliban says about the body, and how this mutilation and decapitation of the bodies in the war is actually basically giving them the pleasure. And I think Diop does a wonderful job in basically showing and telling us that what it is that war does to us psychologically, the exacerbation. So I think, yes, I thoroughly enjoyed the session and learned a lot. And hopefully in the upcoming sessions, I will be able to actively participate. But thank you so much for letting me speak a few words.
You've always been an active participator, but it was your MA finals today, so I didn't expect you to do more than this. Thank you, Raka.
Thank you so much.
I see Ankur iPhone there.
Yes. Well, can you? I am not a member, so thank you for allowing me to speak.
Doesn't matter.
So I can speak now.
Yes.
I'll try to be as short as possible. It was, first of all, I love you all. It was fascinating. I had never participated, and in this 1 year of lockdowns, I've participated in a lot like this, in fact, where I couldn't be there in the flesh, but then the whole world came to me through the laptop. The quality was very, very high. There are just 2 or 3 things I wanted to mention. Regarding the book, and the book in the context of the genre it is set in. I had made this point about me being very indignant that people were, I mean, Diku Naroji, sweet as she is, she was honest enough to say that it repulsed her, okay, and it didn't. And I did make the point that one of the objectives of literature is to shock, surprise, get us out of our comfort zones. And I'll dovetail that with the amazingly prescient thing that Roma Bhattacharya said, that we are all complicit. We in our armchairs and our comfortable lives. People reading Woodhouse at the moment, for God's sake. Well, yes, if you need therapy, yes. But we must, to coin that oft-used phrase, never forget. Never, ever forget. And there are all these voices that are now coming up. For instance, voices talking about homosexuality, lesbianism, Black lives, war, things that disturb. That's more than half the population. That's 70% of the world live very distressed lives. And if there is a work of art, a work of literature that comes out of that, first of all, it has to be regarded with a lot of respect. I'm not an activist. I'm not speaking this from an activist point of view, but from a person with a privileged education. I think it's just amazing that nowadays we have a platform where all this kind of thing happens. So whilst some of you are indignant and while some of you are disturbed, so be it. It's all right. Let's get all a bit shaken up because that's the real world. And the underprivileged, the voices come out, and Diop, I mean, amazing. That's the second novel we have to remember. His life was also turned around. I mean, he was raised in Senegal, but he's now in teaching at the university. Yes, exactly. So, so thank you in the end all very much. I don't know how to. I was invited to this by a cousin of mine, but I would love to eavesdrop on further things, or further sessions you have. Is this a Bengal Club thing?
It is. It is.
Oh, right. Okay. I do get
It's a
invited
Bengal
by a
Club,
few
book
friends
club.
once in a while.
We do
Is
this
it
once
possible for
every month.
outsiders to,
Yes,
is it possible
yes.
for outsiders
I mean,
to sign up for the mailing list?
yes. If you ring up the Bengal Club and talk to Shebonti, who is our librarian, a very esteemed librarian, please put your name in there and she will let me know with your phone number. Thank you so much. I didn't get your full name.
Much honored. Thanks a lot. I'm done. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. Mr. Shaha, Dr. Shaha, are you there?
Yes.
Yes, please
yes,
go
madam.
ahead. Go right ahead.
Julie, first of all, I must thank all the speakers, and of course, it is you and the Bengal Club. Such a fantastic literary session. We are not the students of literature, but I believe you have stimulated us like anything. One thing is just a remark I am passing here. I mean, it's a gory discussion in the book that has been mentioned, but it's a very contemporary in the context of our age group. I'm taught contemporary in that way. I'm speaking the 71 war of Pakistan and this present Bangladesh. The kind of the remarkable books are there. That the recorded horrid descriptions are there. They're recorded. I mean, I can tell you that I have produced one drama by Munir Chowdhury. This is the first play written by anyone on this Bangladesh's Bhasha movement and like that. It was written close to 52, and he was killed by the Pakistani Sena as well as the Rajakars. You know, the Rajakars, the locally created ally of the Pakistan. And the one small description, as you said, that the fingers are mutilated. You know, the scream came from the room when the Munir Chaudhary was being killed, that every single digit of the hand is being cut, and they're shouting, will you be writing Tagore once again with this finger? Well, take this finger also off. Bangla kotha hocchilo. So this is the kind of things we have, and we're not going into details because it is a very nauseating kind of description. The kind of women used to be hung all day in the army barrack by their upside with their hair strung in the wire, and every day somebody is pinching the breast, somebody is just taking a nibble from the belly or some part of the buttock. I mean, this is just a small part I'm saying. So this reference would have helped us that this, as Probita initially said, that we're trained to kill. The army trains to kill. This is perhaps one of the very strong message, and the whole world should, people like us should raise our voice that not that so coolly we'll be saying anymore that army is trained to kill. We should have our indignation towards this philosophy of that that army is trained to kill. We should be against it. We should create a voice against this. Only then this literary discussions of this kind might be having some more meaningful purpose. And this is just all. I get emotional in this. So thank you, Julie, for giving me this opportunity to share some views. Thank you.
Dr. Shaha, that was very, very interesting. And I think I would be very interested in the Bangla Sahityer je kotha apni bolchen. So if you can forward me,
I will.
You know, some details, I would be very interested. Thank you so much.
I will. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. We've heard so many voices. Does anybody else here want to chip in? Our regulars, I hope you all enjoyed it. We enjoyed it. We enjoyed the engagement very much. It's time for me actually to say thank you to Gurudash, Mr. Gurudash Mitro, who is always so accommodating, enthusiastic. He's our technological wizard. Shebunti, are you here? Thank you for being there, though quietly today, because you're not feeling terribly well.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Julie, for such an interesting session. I had been looking very much forward to it, and I just want to add one sentence, if I may, that each time I was listening to the comments, the thoughts that our participants have shared this evening, I kept on thinking about Wilfred Owen's those famous quotes: "Shall they return to beatings of great bells in wild train loads? A few, too few may creep back along the village bells up half-known roads."
Beautiful, beautiful. Lovely note to end the session with, and thank you again, everybody. Do join us, even if you're not a member. Mrs. Shebunti Sengupta is our Bengal Club librarian. You just have to get in touch with her, give her your phone number and your name, and Shebunti will forward them all to me. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank
Love
you.
guys. Look forward to September. I'll try and choose another provocative book for us. Good night, all. Thank you.
Thank you.